you probably both know this, but we had a ballot initiative here in California that allowed the legislature to start the process of just staying on daylight savings time all the time. So
it'd be fine with me. Just stick one and stick with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's so many myths about daylight savings time and the other thing and all that. It's just the primary thing is most of the cost comes from changing.
Yeah, yeah. There's a funny YouTube video if you look it up on daylight saving time, done as the trailer for like an action thriller horror movie.
Oh, I gotta get that.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's really tense. You have people like pointing guns at each other, going, "It's daylight saving time. It's singular."
Like
Is
the
it
book
really
of Revelation and Revelation.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Both of those I get wrong. I think I say Revelations.
Oh yeah, don't. I'll slap your wrist. I need to get a nut.
You have
get a
verbally slapped
ruler.
my wrist
Okay.
before about it,
Okay.
but you were very gentle about it. But
good.
I actually I think my problem is I'm inconsistent on both of them. Sometimes I'll say Revelation, sometimes Revelations, sometimes daylight saving.
Personally,
sometimes savings.
I always say daylight savings time, except when
I'll
I
slap your
don't,
wrist.
You know.
If you'd like to call, if you have any questions about the Catholic faith, we welcome your calls, 888-318-7884. That gets you right into the studio here. It's not the usual Radio Maria line. Our studios are in California. We are extremely grateful to be on the air on Radio Maria, but we are a separate apostolate, Catholic Answers. Our purpose is to explain and defend the Catholic faith, and we got our own phone number, 888-318-7884. Oh, and did I not say share the Catholic faith?
No, but it's a subtle verbal clue.
Oh, I know why Jimmy said share the Catholic faith, because I'm supposed to share that we're on,
Share the stream of this
on Facebook.
on Facebook,
Right, with all the people who follow.
Not so subtle anymore, Si.
No, I know. But right. So you can also follow us on Facebook or YouTube or radiomaria.us, the live stream all the time. And they archive the show as well. You can always get past shows at radiomaria.us. Okay, so Jimmy has a book, one of his books, Teaching with Authority is the newest.
I have several books in my library at home. Yeah.
I don't mean that you own a book. I mean you are the author.
Okay.
Or at least someone is using your name to publish books. But what if someone took their nom de plume to be your name? That would be illegal, right?
Not necessarily.
Oh.
It's more complex. I mean, how many John Smiths are in the world? Are you going to say only one of them gets to write a book?
Well, only one of them gets to be the Obergruppenführer.
We got to get that guy out of his high castle.
That's an obscure reference. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that
The Man
show,
in the High Castle. Yeah,
I tried to watch it. Only got
John
through one
Smith
season.
is Oh, you only got through one season?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Before it gets even weirder.
Okay, so another of your books is A Daily Defense, 365 Days plus one to becoming a better apologist. And one of the things you do in this book is you give 365 plus one kind of challenges, I would say. Challenges to the Catholic
I respond to 365 challenges.
Well, and then you respond to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so I'm going to pick, we used to play this game, but I haven't played it with you for a while.
Okay.
Just random. Is that you okay with random? Or do you want Rochelle to pick it randomly just to prove that it's random? Here I go. I'm flipping through the
Someone
pages.
should pick it pick a challenge.
Boop.
Challenge.
I just did.
Okay.
Does Mary's perpetual virginity matter? Boom, here's the challenge. What difference does it make if Mary remained a virgin? Couldn't God have continued Jesus' mission if she had had other children?
Well, sure, God could have. God could have continued Jesus' mission without his mother being a virgin at all. And so that raises the question of why God felt it was important for his son to be born of a virgin. Now, one reason you could say is, well, okay, we have this prophecy in Isaiah.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, and so, God predicted in advance that he would do this, but that doesn't answer why did he predict it.
No, he's good on the follow-through, though. He is very good on the follow-through.
So it seems to me that the reason Jesus was born of a virgin in the first place, the deep down fundamental reason, is because it underscores the fact that he's God's son. that he has, because he has no human father. Well, then
no possible.
Yeah, exactly. So there is something miraculous about Jesus. It portrays him as the Son of God by the very facts of his birth. Because even when parthenogenesis happens in nature, that's where you have a birth from just a female, the result is always female. At least in species that code their sex chromosomes the way ours do. And
Wow, I never knew that.
I think I learned that in like marine biology or something. I totally forgot that.
Yeah, there are.
Parthenogenesis?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are. So parthene is the Greek word for virgin, and genesis is the Greek word for beginning, and so beginning from a virgin. It's a phenomenon that occurs in nature in some species, like there are some fish and some lizards and things like that, and they do it particularly when they're under stress.
Yeah.
And they have no other way, and there are situations where females can give birth, but the result is always female. And so this is not a phenomenon that happens in humans. And to have a virgin birth in a human and to have the result be male, which requires a Y chromosome that females don't have, just underscores the miraculous nature of this, and it reveals Jesus as the Son of God just by the very facts of his birth. So I think the ultimate reason for the virgin birth itself is God wanted to really underscore the fact, this is my son. This is not a mere man. This is not just a son of man. It's the Son of God. Now, so if that's the reason for the virgin birth, how does that relate to Mary's perpetual virginity? Well, if Mary did not remain a virgin, if she began to have relations with Joseph and they went on to have other children, it would raise a question of, well, just how early in their marriage did they begin having these relations? Because we know they went on to have other children. Maybe they got started a little earlier than they were willing to admit.
Oh, yeah,
and it would undermine Jesus's the revelation of Jesus as the Son of God. So if you really want to show Jesus is the Son of God, not only do you want a virgin birth, you want a perpetual virginity after that, so it doesn't undermine the initial revelation of him as God's Son. So could God have sent Jesus into the world and continued his mission if Mary had other children? Yeah. Could he have sent Jesus into the world and had to perform his mission even without a virgin birth? Sure. But by doing it this way, God reveals and doesn't undermine the revelation of the fact that he is God's Son.
It's like he's got a plan for all this stuff.
Yeah. I know. I think that's really cool. I've never heard it explained quite that way about the fact when it comes to, let me see if I get this right, parthenogenesis?
Parthenogenesis,
That obviously they only have female offspring because they only have X chromosomes, and Jesus obviously is a male, so he has an X and a Y. I'd never put it together that way, heard anyone else put it together that way. That's absolutely like mind-blowing.
Well, thank you. That's why I study science books in addition to religion books.
Okay. Yeah. I need to do that.
I have, as you may know, I also call English country dances, and there's an awesome dance written in 1932 called Parthenia. And I love this dance. I frequently call it for groups. And Parthenia, since it's also related to Parthene, as you hear, the word for virgin in Greek, I'll explain when I call it that at the beginning of the dance, I will say, okay, Parthenia is Greek. Parthene means virgin, and so Parthenia is the land of the virgins. I'm guessing they maintain their population mostly through immigration. And although they do have some rather strict citizenship requirements, and then we do the dance, and then at the end of the dance I say, the Parthenia Tourism Board hopes you have enjoyed your stay in the land of the virgins.
888-31 Truth is our number, 888-318-7884. I should probably ask you both about your podcast since you're both super big podcasters. Jimmy, let's start with you. What's the latest on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World? One of your many podcasting duties. But
So the latest on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, this Friday's episode was on the Phoenix Lights UFO incident. It's one of the big, it happened back in 1997, and actually I wasn't there, but I knew about it the night it was happening. You had these massive light displays appear over Phoenix. Thousands of people saw them. It went on for hours. People took video and pictures of them.
I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's one of the best documented UFO incidents of all time.
Is the possible answer to it? It's Arizona. Weird stuff happens in Arizona. Is that a possible?
Yes, that is an explanation. It's just a question of how deep do you want to go in that.
I see. Oh, by the way, a fellow from Arizona said hello to us on Facebook. He said, it was Jeff, and he said, greetings from Arizona where we don't manipulate time.
Yeah.
Because is it the only out of the 50 states that doesn't do a time change? Hawaii might not either.
Oh,
I'm not
I don't
sure.
know about that.
It was the only one. I think there may be more now. And if you wonder why, I once asked, this was years ago, but I asked a friend of mine from Arizona why they don't, and he said, if there's one thing we don't want more of in the summer, it's daylight.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, right. And Rochelle, your podcast is Clumsy Theosis. I'm familiar with the word clumsy. I also am familiar with the word theosis because I've been doing this for a long time. But just so that people know, Clumsy Theosis is akin to saying clumsy becoming like God.
But there's some problems with the way that you're saying that there. So theosis is the act of becoming God-like. Sometimes if you say becoming like God, some people might get this notion that you become God yourself, and like maybe inhabit your own planet, like some other religions think. No, but that's not it at all. So this idea of becoming God-like is to answer this call to holiness that we've all been given from Jesus, and to be able to participate in God's glory while we live. But it's not just something reserved for us after we die. It's something that we participate in now, growing in holiness. You might want to call it growing in sanctity, becoming a saint. But yeah, so living a life with the Lord, living through you and in you. Yeah.
And your latest?
My latest, well, since it's Lent, we've been trying to dive a little bit deeper. And so the last one was on the Exodus in the Gospel of John. And then 2 episodes before that, it was Genesis, the book of Genesis and
creation.
I
was going to say, I thought you were misspeaking because I remember the Genesis one. I haven't seen the Exodus one yet.
Yeah, so I've done
Normally,
2 that way.
The Exodus is in the book of Exodus, but
Yeah,
there
right.
can be exceptions.
So
Get out.
Yeah,
oh, wait,
so-
that's what Exodus means.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, that's what we've been doing. And so we're going to be covering John a little bit more throughout Lent, as well as other things that will help people dive deeper into this season to renew their faith and become like the Lord through this process of theosis.
Praise God, yeah. Become like the Lord. I feel like actually that's something that people often don't get about Christianity. But maybe different types of Christians have different ways. But for us Catholics, a common thing is receive the sacraments and avoid mortal sin, and you can go to heaven, which is. There's nothing evil in that, I suppose, but
it just falls short of what we're called to. It doesn't. I don't want to say make use, because the faith is not something to be used, but it is definitely there for our benefit, everything that we do and believe, so that we can have like a fullness of life. We're not just here just punching the clock day after day, like, oh, thank goodness I didn't commit mortal sin, yesterday or today. But to really actually live a life of fullness and using the gifts of the Holy Spirit that you are given, and learning how to love each other and to love the Lord and to bring the kingdom of heaven here to earth with God's grace.
All right, let's get on that. So Clumsy Theosis, you can get it. She's finally trained me to do this. Wherever you get your podcast, you can get Clumsy Theosis.
What about Mysterious World?
Mysterious World, you can also get wherever you get your podcasts.
That's true.
And I just want to say, I love when this kind of stuff happens. Davina says hello from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
Ooh, I've been there.
And then I'm going to say it with a V, but it could be a W. Valdemar, greetings from Poland. I don't know how Polish people pronounce a W, but
maybe with a W.
Okay, Waldemar.
Yeah.
And then you have to tell me Waldemar. You can tell me and then Miko right after that. Hi from the Philippines. I love that. A little trip around the world there on what's that?
Kumusta.
Oh yeah.
Which is used as a greeting in Tagalog, the main language in the Philippines, and you can hear where it came from
Yeah, como
como está from Spanish.
Right. That's like the cowboy word vamos.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Vamos,
like,
let's
yeah.
go.
From vamos, yeah. As I know that because I have I have a lot of Spanish because of Dora the Explorer.
Oh, really? Okay.
Come on, vámonos.
I could never
Everybody,
get into
let's go.
Dora the Explorer.
Really?
Yeah, I love animation. I love cartoons.
The map, the map.
But
No,
I
none of that?
didn't love that one.
Swiper, no swiping.
Animaniacs was more my speed, or
Oh, yeah.
Freakazoid, or Pinky and
Oh,
the
yeah.
Brain.
Yes, I remember those after school.
Jordan says W in Polish is like a V, but I don't
Oh,
know.
okay.
How am I going to trust a guy named Jordan? That doesn't sound Polish
what
at all.
about Karol
could-
Wojtyła,
We could.
Oh, yeah.
right? Don't we say it as a W, or are we saying it wrong?
Okay, now I don't know if
Let's
people are
find
playing
out.
with me or if
So-
they're. I think this Lisa or Liza
Polish
from Dubai.
phonology.
She's on the train in Dubai. Is that real?
On the-
Yeah,
On the train.
on the train in Dubai.
Oh,
She's
yeah,
listening.
She's listening to us on the train.
So, and there's repeated questions from one listener on Facebook today about yoga. So I'm going to get to the yoga question. All right, just relax. We're going to get there. But
Was that a pun?
oh, I didn't relax. Stretch for a minute. We'll get to yoga. Okay, so Pope Francis, the current Pope of the Catholic Church. I'm just filling you in case you didn't know
Okay.
this, Rochelle.
Oh, okay, I just got a. I was looking up Polish phonology online,
Yeah.
and it says for W, it's to be pronounced as like V, and before voiceless consonants, it may be pronounced as F. So a voiceless consonant is one where you don't turn on your vocal cords, like S. That's a voiceless consonant.
Oh, it's all up at the front of the mouth. Oh,
Yeah, well, no, it could be at the back of the mouth, but it's that you don't turn on the vocal cords is what makes it voiceless. So it could be F if it's pronounced like F if it's in front of a voiceless consonant, otherwise pronounced like V.
And look, Valdemar just checked in, and
And-
he wrote exactly exclamation point. Polish W is like a V.
There we go. And
Thanks,
and,
Waldemar.
And it's got a vowel after it, so that's not a voiceless consonant. So that agrees with what I found here.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so the current Pope of the Catholic Church.
So not the Coptic Pope.
Not the Coptic Pope, who's I forgot his name. I actually remembered his name at one point. Now I can't. Oh, now Jimmy's going to look
I
up.
just want to confirm because it was Pope Shenouda III.
Shenouda, that's it. Yeah, I was thinking I would name one of my kids Shenouda, but my wife shot that down. Isn't Shenouda? No, you don't look
I don't
enthusiastic
know.
about the name
Yeah,
Shenouda
not
for a
too
boy.
People may be surprised that other groups have figures called Pope, but
Just
Pope
means-
it's the word for father.
Yeah.
And so it gets used. Oh, it's Pope Tawadros II right now. I thought someone had succeeded Pope Shenouda, but because Pope just means father, Papa.
Yeah.
It gets used for all kinds of religious figures. It gets used for priests, where we say father in whatever the local language is. It gets used for the head of the Catholic Church and the head of the Coptic Church, and it used to be used for other like patriarchs around the world.
Or you would say-
it also gets via its Hebrew form, Abba. Gets used for the heads of monasteries.
Oh, abbots.
Abbots. That's where abbot comes from.
Okay,
But we do have a current pope in the Catholic Church. His name is Francis. What about him?
he released, or he opened the entire archive of a previous pope of the Catholic Church, who was named Pope Pius XII. Mm-hmm. And Pius XII is famous and in some places thought notorious because he was the Pope during the Second World War, and of course there's all the controversy. There was a guy who wrote a book about him called Hitler's Pope. There was another guy who wrote a play about him.
The Hitler's Pope guy was John Cornwell. The play was called The Deputy by Rolf Hocketh.
Yeah, and they all want to say, well, this Pope cooperated with Hitler, basically, at the very least.
Or didn't do enough to fight Hitler.
Yeah.
Now, you were saying earlier, Cy, that Pope Francis has ordered his archives to be opened and unlocked. I had no idea that they had been sealed. Why was that?
Oh yeah, there's the papal. I mean, you have to protect certain. I suppose it's just like a president. They don't open all the archives of a president for I think 75 years after his death, because some people are still living who are would be named in those files. Or
there were confidential things, and if somebody knew, like let's say you knew that if you're working to resolve some situation with the Pope, but it's a sensitive thing, and you know that, they're just going to turn around and announce this, then you're going to be less inclined to try to help things behind the scenes. So to enable people to communicate freely and work on stuff behind the scenes, they guarantee that, like, this isn't going to come out during your lifetime and stuff.
Okay.
And of course, the Pope deals with a lot of very, very sensitive things. And so usually archivists go through the material even before it's put out, because you don't, I mean, let's say somebody died 100 years ago, but something horribly shameful was in there, some secret. You don't want to reveal that.
Not initially, not necessarily. It's like the declassification process for a government.
Yeah.
So the government will periodically release classified material based on how old it is, and it's this isn't really sensitive anymore. But they'll go through it and say, this part still is. This guy's still alive. We've got to redact out this part.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they'll have a partial release, but then eventually enough time goes by that everybody is gone. The methods have changed, so you're not going to give away your confidential methods of spying in the case of a government, and we can let this whole document out.
Okay.
So I guess the Pope Francis is going a little early with Pope Pius XII, but it's not terribly early. I mean, he died in the Pius XII actually lived into the 50s,
into the late 50s.
Right. So
like 1959.
So it's not that long ago, but people are very, very interested in these. However, most of these have been available to some limited. Like there's certain scholars who the Vatican will treat as a trusted scholar, and so this includes both Jewish and Catholic scholars, maybe others, who've seen them. So it doesn't seem like there'll be something shocking.
No, I would doubt it. It's just like going to a presidential library. There are certain qualified scholars. They're have academic credentials. They've applied to the institution. They've got their secret library card. They go to the presidential archives and they get to look over some of these documents that aren't available to the general public yet.
Secret library card makes it sound extra good, though. But here's my basic question. It strikes me that after the Second World War, there was a general sense that Pius had been a very good pope for extremely difficult time. A very, very difficult time. And then it wasn't until the 1960s, so maybe 15 to 20 years after the war, that certain individuals like Rolf Hocketh started to question the Pope's, was he secretly a Hitler guy, or what did he do? Nothing. Why didn't he help the Jews? And I just want to get your thoughts on that.
So this is a black legend. This is not true. Eugenio Pacelli, the man who became Pius XII, couldn't stand Hitler. Absolutely hated his ideology.
Yeah.
He had previously been the nuncio to Germany, and really was very well aware of what a danger the Nazis were. He participated in writing part of the encyclical Mitbrenner Sorge, which was an encyclical that came out before the war during the reign of Pius XI. And it's unusual as an encyclical in several respects. The first thing is it's an attack on Nazi ideology.
Yeah.
Now, they don't say Nazi ideology in it, but it's clear. I mean, they're talking about...
But they do say racism and racialism and all
blood and soil ideology and stuff like that. So they're using these Nazi buzzwords. And it was written, unlike other encyclicals, because normally an encyclical at the time especially was written in Latin. Now these days it's written in some other language and then it's translated into Latin. This one was written directly in German, and which is why it has a German title, Mitbrenner Sorge, which means with burning anxiety or with burning concern, which also indicates how concerned they are.
Yeah.
They say, we've got burning concern about what's going on here, guys. And then they smuggled it into Germany they smuggled it in and had it secretly printed and then read from the pulpits of every Catholic parish on, I believe it was Palm Sunday.
Yeah.
So it's like maximum attendance.
Wait till everybody's there.
Yeah. And it's a denunciation of Nazism. So, and Pius XI was one of the people who was involved, or Eugenio Pacelli, the future Pius XII, was one of the people who was involved in that. Then during the war, he was the head of the secret Catholic underground to protect Jewish people.
Yeah.
It was in significant measure because of him that a lot of Italian Jews were saved and were not deported to the death camps. He would use Vatican funds to bribe people to look the other way and stuff.
And false documents were
false
issued.
baptismal certificates. Oh, this guy's a Christian.
Yeah, right.
And after, also during the war, he expected to be arrested because the Nazis eventually took over Italy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people...
After the death of Mussolini, or even before the death of Mussolini.
Right, they put him back in power.
Right.
And a lot of people may think, well, wait, weren't they allies? Yeah, but the war wasn't going according to plan, and the Nazis decided the best thing to do was take over Italy, so they did.
Yeah.
And when that happened, Pius XII expected to be arrested and to prevent Hitler from being able to use him as a bargaining chip. He wrote a letter saying, if I am arrested, then I automatically resign as Pope.
Yeah.
So Hitler can't use him as a chip anymore. He becomes useless. And the cardinals are to gather in Portugal, which was a neutral country. So they're going to gather in a neutral country and hold a conclave there outside of Nazi territory to elect the new pope.
Yeah.
So he was very much not on Hitler's side. He was actively working against Hitler. After the war, when he died, Golda Meir, who was the future prime minister of Israel, made this statement saying, even when everyone else was silent, the church spoke out and defended Jewish lives during the Holocaust and stuff. So it was well recognized at the time that he was very much opposed to the Nazis and that he very much worked to help the Jewish people during that period. He was even by one Jewish organization named a righteous Gentile, which is like a highly prestigious title to be named a righteous Gentile, because of his actions. But then later, you got this legend started, which feeds certain people's anti-Catholic narratives, and that's why it's persisted. But it's not based in reality. No, indeed, and it also I think any sense that Pope Pius was Pope during a difficult time where he could actually have made things worse. There were he could have said, "Hey, everybody, rebel against Hitler and kill Hitler in the streets," but it would have just made things worse. There was no actual. I mean, not that popes call for the killing of heads of state and all that, but you see what I'm saying? Anybody could say that, and people were saying that. There were multiple plots against Hitler's life. Right. But certainly the death of, there's a way in which it seems almost certain that the death of Edith Stein, for example, was a retribution for that. What they discovered is that if they denounced things in certain ways, that the Nazis would take reprisals by, if you've spoken out on behalf of this Jewish community, guess what? We're sending them all to the death camps now. Yeah, right. So a very difficult time. Apparently, in many ways, a great pope. He's currently blessed. Yeah, right. And also just a great pope in the sense that many of his writings are seminal writings. I don't think he felt that the time was right for a council. His successor did, Pope John the 23rd, but he certainly was open to the calls for reform in the church and was a proponent of them. A very measured man, though. Now, he was very judicious person. Yeah. So, anyways, you're listening to Catholic Answers today on Radio Maria U.S., a Christian voice in your home. At the moment, we're talking about Pope Francis opening the archives of Pope Pius XII. I think a thing to be welcomed. However, I must say, people will twist things. So you just wait for that to happen.
Our co-host today is Rochelle Lucero, the podcaster behind the podcast Clumsy Theosis. Hello again, Rochelle.
Hello.
And our guest is Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of many books, including Teaching with Authority, his latest publication. We have a phone call. I mentioned the number and then I didn't go to calls. Are you two ready to take a call?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
888-318-7884 is our number if you'd like to call with a question. Kala in Worcester, Ohio. You are on. Did I pronounce your name right? Kala?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Kala. How old are you?
5.
Oh, we're so lucky to have your call. What is your question?
Why can we not see God and the angels?
Oh, that is a great question. Why can't we see them? Why can't we see God and his angels? Anybody is welcome to say they're all scared to answer your question.
No. So I just wanted to give Rochelle the opportunity if she wanted to.
I was not expecting that. Very polite.
So we can't see God normally because God, apart from becoming Jesus, God does not have a body. And so we can see bodies, objects that are physical that you could touch, like tables and chairs and rocks and other people and animals and plants. We can see all of those things because they all have a body or they're a physical object, but God doesn't, apart from when he became Jesus. And so we can't see God for that reason. We also can't see the angels for that reason because they don't have bodies either. So normally we can't see God or the angels. If Jesus's body was here on earth at the moment, like it was during his ministry 2,000 years ago, then we could see him. But his body right now is up in heaven, and so it normally doesn't appear here on earth, although it does become present in the Eucharist at Mass. But there it's under the appearances of bread and wine, so it looks like bread and wine because Jesus has disguised himself there. He's not letting his body be seen by our eyes. So that's the basic reason. Now, sometimes, even though they don't have bodies and we can't normally see them, God will appear to people in kind of a vision, and he'll let the angels appear to people in kind of a vision. Mm-hmm. So we can kind of see God and the angels in those circumstances, but God has to decide for someone to have a vision. We can't have visions just on our own. God has to give us special permission to have a vision and see him or the angels in that way.
And I want to add, just because you can't see God or the angels doesn't mean that they are not always around you and that you can't talk to them or that you can't hear them, because you can hear God talk to you all the time in your heart when you pray.
Just like you're talking to us right now over the phone and hearing us over the radio.
Kala, okay. Is that do those answers help you?
Yes.
Well, thank you very, very much for your call.
Yeah.
Will you call us anytime, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Man, that's all right. That's a tough question, though.
Yeah. That's a good question, though.
That's a good, solid question, yeah from a 5-year-old. But she can spend, just like all of us, I suppose, you can spend the rest of your life thinking about it and
never
still
ask.
And still be plumbing the depths.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's hard for us. I have a great difficulty visualizing or thinking of anything I can't visualize. I'm just not good at that.
Hypercubes, they're so hard.
Oh, well, hypercube, obviously, I can visualize. It's
Okay.
No, actually, I can't. So, like spirits.
Yeah.
When I think of spirit as intellect, I kind of have an image, but I don't. It's
What's
very
your image?
As a brain
I guess
in a
it's
jar?
no, not as a brain in a jar, but as I can analogize it to my own experience of thinking thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So that's what I have. I got nothing else on spirits.
We do tend to have mental images that we use as tokens
Yeah.
for abstract concepts. In C.S. Lewis's book Miracles, he talks about a person that he met whose parents would talk to her, I believe, and describe God as a substance, which philosophically is accurate because you do. It's not the normal word for the use of the word substance, but philosophically that actually is true according to one of the. Every person is a substance in the philosophical sense. But when we think of the word substance, and like if you're a little girl being told God is a substance, you're not going to have the theological vocabulary to understand that. You're going to think of the word substance as meaning stuff.
Yeah.
And so the little girl adopted the mental token of tapioca pudding as a substance for thinking about what God was. The problem was, so whenever she thought about God and what God was like, she'd think of tapioca pudding. The problem was she didn't like tapioca pudding.
Bummer. Oh man, tapioca pudding that helps me to be attracted to God. Thinking of God as tapioca pudding, yes.
I was in thinking about mental tokens that we use to represent things.
Yeah.
I started thinking years ago about, well, what do people who have different senses use as mental tokens for what I would use? Because as someone who is a hearing person, I will hear voices in my head, not crazy voices, but like I'll play conversations. I'll hear. I have a kind of internal monologue or narrative. I hear voices to represent words, and I thought, but I have a cousin who's deaf. And I realized, well, he's deaf from birth, so he's not going to hear voices in his head as an internal narrative or monologue. When he thinks a sentence, he's not hearing that sentence in his head. So what does he have? And so I asked him, and he explained that he sees people signing in his head.
Oh,
as
how
his
interesting.
mental representation of sentences.
Yeah.
I also was thinking about what do blind people have as an experience when they hear words that refer to colors. And because they're going to have the human mind is going to come up with something to represent that, even if they don't have a native experience of color because they've been blind from birth. And so I asked a guy I knew who was blind from birth. I said, "What do you think of when you hear color terms?" Because he knew, and I'd guessed that it would be something like surfaces, because blind people,
Like
interact
texture?
with physical, will interact with things as if with surfaces of things, and they know colors reside on the surfaces of things from what they've been told by sighted people. And sure enough, I was right. And he said, "Yeah, when I think of like the word yellow, I think of a wooden bench." And the surface of the wooden bench, because when I was a little kid, I sat on a wooden bench and they told me it was yellow.
Oh, how interesting. I wonder how much this kind of is an act, like it relates to our experience here in this world and our experience in the next world, that you literally couldn't probably explain to us well what it's like to be in heaven.
Let me give you an example.
Okay.
Because I told my friend who was blind from birth I thought of a way to describe what seeing is like. Because what seeing does is it allows us to understand the shape of things that are in front of us. And blind people have the ability to do that. They just have to feel it one patch at a time. Also, with colors, we feel textures that are invisible to touch. So what seeing is like, thinking from a blind person's perspective, it's like touching the front surface of everything in your environment all at once.
Oh, yeah.
And feeling these invisible textures. And so your brain is processing millions of pieces of information at once about what you're seeing. Now, because of the way our brain works, it simplifies that for us. But that's essentially what it's doing. It's giving us the experience of what it would be like to run your hands over the front of everything in your environment all at once, and feel, in addition to the basic shape, these invisible textures that normally aren't sensitive to touch. And he said, "Wow, that is totally freaky."
Which is, I imagine if someone described to you how your body works and how things work in heaven, you would probably go, "Wow, that is totally freaky."
Yeah.
Like, I always think of the one where people get kind of offended by Holy Thursday, Jesus saying, "This is my body," because he's holding his own body in his hands, but is also holding his crucified body in his hands, because maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but so he hasn't, I guess the way to say it is, he hasn't yet offered his body on the cross, and so how can any of this be? And so part of the explanation is, look, you don't know how things work.
Yeah.
like it was like saying,
and we actually got a better insight on this in the 20th century, because people, based on our normal experience of the world, we assume that space and time are absolutes. But after 1905, when Albert Einstein began to introduce his theories of relativity, we began to understand that space and time are not absolute. Space can be bent, it can be warped, you can have space loop back on itself. And so modern science has a way, and I'm not saying this is how the Eucharist works, but it has a way of understanding how a single object can be in more than one place at a time.
Yeah.
And so, so what previously was just a mystery that God had revealed to us that we didn't have a basis for other than faith, we now see, science is now agreeing this is actually possible, even naturally.
Who would have thought?
well, Jesus.
Of course.
I mean, you almost wonder, how did Jesus see the world? I mean, that
with his eyes.
Yeah, no, I know, but his understanding of it so much more profound than everyone around him.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause we see so partially, and he sees the whole.
Yeah.
I guess that everybody knows that, and I'm saying it like it's a deep insight, but
It's a good thing to
we already
meditate on.
knew that. He's God.
Paul talks about it. You know, you're seeing now, you know, dimly as through through a mirror or something. Is that how he said it?
Right, through a glass. Right.
In a glass darkly, which means in a mirror dimly.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Same thing.
Which is the name of my novel. No, that's not really true.
No, the name of your novel is Ad Limina.
Oh, yeah, that is correct. Okay, so I want to get to yoga, because people have been asking about yoga on Facebook.
Okay. We should also answer a question from YouTube, because we have a number of questions from our YouTube friends as well.
Okay, so the basic question about yoga is, what's wrong with it from a Catholic? I mean, there's different ways people phrased it, but so I'm kind of summing up.
Rochelle, you want to do this one?
Okay, well, this is what I'm going to say, and if I'm wrong, Jimmy's going to correct me. All right, so my understanding about yoga is that when you do the different animal poses, you are giving some sort of salutation or like credence to these animals as though they were maybe like spiritual. So you're letting like yourself be open to this other spiritual realm of creatures. Am I wrong in this, Jimmy?
Well, that is an aspect of yoga with which I'm unfamiliar.
Okay.
What I would say is we have to clarify what we mean by yoga. Originally, what yoga is it's a Hindu spiritual discipline. And as a Christian, you shouldn't be doing a Hindu spiritual discipline, because it's not our religion. We have our own spiritual disciplines. Ours are based in divine revelation, so we know that they are safe and reliable and effective, and we should be, as Christians, we should be looking to the treasures that God has given us to inform our spiritual lives. What many people mean by yoga, though, is stretching exercises and getting into different postures for physical purposes. And if that's all you mean, then there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with stretching. There's nothing wrong with doing exercises. There's nothing wrong with getting into certain postures to limber yourself up. All that's fine. The question is, are you and your yoga instructor putting some kind of spiritual overlay onto it that is contrary to the Christian faith? And if you're doing that, then absolutely you should not be doing it, because you're injecting non-Christian spiritual elements into your life, and you shouldn't be doing that.
And I think, because I used to do yoga before coming back to the faith, and a lot of instructors, because I would go to the YMCA, so we'd have a bunch of different instructors, they incorporate some sort of spirituality unknowingly, because that's kind of the way that they learn. Like, you do like these sun salutations, and so you're like, you know, you're greeting the sun, and in a way that it's it's not just a posture anymore. It's you're looking beyond into like a spiritual,
Yeah.
you know.
Right. And if you're doing that kind of thing, then you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, and you don't realize initially when you're doing it, especially if you're in, you know, some gym and it's not like a super granola yogi type place and you're just like, I'm just doing stretches. But the way, like, you have to pay attention to the way your instructor is saying things.
Yeah. That's what my wife does all kinds of stretching, and she does it at like 24-hour fitness, you know, so it's like a regular fitness place. And so she does the yoga, and she says most of the yoga instructors at 24-hour fitness are just getting you to stretch. They're doing,
Yeah.
but she said it's not consistent. There will be people who will come in and start saying like religious things.
Yes.
And so here's an example of how the question gets rather subtle. So part of me wants to say, well, you shouldn't be greeting the sun because it's just a bag, it's just a ball of fusing plasma, and it's not going to be aware of your salutation, and it's.
Wait, you're saying that balls of plasma are not aware?
They're not conscious.
That we know of.
Now, there is an argument you can make that stars could be alive, but we're not going to talk about that today.
That's right.
But they're certainly not conscious, and so you're like talking to something that can't understand you. But then we talk to pets, and they don't understand most of what we're saying to them.
No.
And then you have St. Francis of Assisi greeting
And St. Anthony.
greeting the sun and the moon as part of God's creation. And he didn't think that I assume he didn't think that they were conscious creatures who literally heard him. And you even see things like this in the Bible, where you have the psalmist saying, like, all the trees clap your hands in praise of God. So there can be, and this is obviously spiritual, it's obviously consistent with our tradition, and because it is the basis of our tradition in the Bible, and
Really?
it obviously is not meant to be taken literally, but it can still play a role. And so this shows how subtle some of these things can be, and we need to be very careful in thinking through what's acceptable and what's not, because there are things in our tradition that are consistent with some of this language, but then it can get taken too far and be understood in a non-Christian way.
There is a certain kind of joyless American efficiency to Christianity sometimes, which is just it's this and it's not that, and it's very intellectual. And when you read the Psalms, for example, there's all this great almost ecstatic kind of language in there, and that's very hard to square with this kind of joyless.
We're Americans.
thing.
We don't do poetry.
Yeah, right. Well, who's that is actually might well be un-American. Actually, poetry might be un-American.
It's not on that baseball apple pie list.
No, but it's a baseball apple pie poetry. Who's going to do that?
Yeah.
Again, you're listening to Catholic Answers Today on Radio Maria US, a Christian voice in your home. You can find out all about Radio Maria US by visiting them online at radiomaria.us. You can find out about us by visiting Catholic.com. And you said you wanted to take a question from
YouTube, because
the
they've been
YouTubers.
asking questions as well.
All right.
We have some on our...
Oh, we've got some on the...
Yeah.
I got you. So I get to pick. Or did you see one that you like already?
Whatever you want.
Okay, so I'm going to go with Paige because she's at the top. Why are tongues no longer consecrated to receive Eucharist? Why can we now take the Eucharist in our hands?
Well, I don't know that tongues were specially consecrated in the past.
It's not something familiar to me.
Yeah. What I would say is our whole bodies are consecrated at baptism, and so your hands are consecrated, your tongue is consecrated, everything about you is consecrated, and consequently, you need to honor God with your whole body. In terms of the Eucharist, it has been a practice periodically down through history to vary the way in which the Eucharist is received. In the early church, ordinary Christians did at times take the Eucharist in their hands to receive the Eucharist before putting it in their mouths. There are even discussions in the early church fathers of like place one of your hands on top of the other to make a little throne to receive King Jesus in the Eucharist. And so what happened after the Second Vatican Council was there was a desire on the part of the world's bishops to retrieve some of these ancient traditions in the Latin Rite and bring them back. And the Holy See gave permission to the bishops' conferences to implement communion in the hand in their own territories if they chose. The U.S. bishops chose to do that. And so we have that as an option. The Holy See also, though, protects the right of individuals to receive on the tongue, if that's their choice, which happens to be my choice, but that's just my choice. And so it's up to you how you want to receive it, but whether you're receiving directly on the tongue or whether you're receiving in the hand before you put the host in your mouth, the basis of your contact with the Eucharist is you are a baptized Christian. Your baptism has consecrated you and made you able to receive the Eucharist.
Paige, thank you very much for the question.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add that I think some people might think this idea of receiving on the tongue is the way that it's always been done, and Jimmy's illustrated through the Church Fathers that that's not the case. There was never like a universal command to only receive it one way. And myself as a Byzantine Catholic, our liturgy is the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, and the way we receive the Eucharist, you have leavened bread, and it's cut up into like cubes and triangles also. But the blood of Christ is also mingled in with the bread, and so the priest has to use a spoon to give it to us.
Yep. Yeah.
So it depends on your rite and the way that your rite has. The tradition has developed over time. There's never been like a this is how it has to be kind of way.
Yeah, another mode is intinction, where you will have a Western style host that's then dipped in the precious blood.
Right.
I was, I've written a book about the liturgy, and I was surprised to see some of the options that used to be in the liturgical documents in the Latin Church for how to receive the Eucharist, and in particular for the precious blood. Drinking from the cup and intinction I was familiar with, but what I had not been as familiar with was an option that used to exist until very recently, which was using a metal straw. I
forgot about it.
Yeah,
I heard about that.
They don't call it a straw, they say a tube. But receiving the precious blood through a tube of that's gold plated on the inside, and wow, that's not part of my experience. I've never seen that, but it's there in the books as a perfectly legitimate option for receiving the Eucharist until quite recently.
But it's illegal to use straws now in California. So, isn't it?
I think you can still use straws at Burger King, but not to receive the precious blood.
I always joke about California because you never know what's legal and what's not. I mean, you used to be able to get a plastic bag, and you can't get a plastic bag now, unless you pay a dime.
Actually, I like that now because now they're not cheapening the plastic bag.
I know, you get a better plastic bag.
Better plastic bag.
Rochelle Lucero has been our co-host this hour. Rochelle is the host of the podcast Clumsy Theosis. Get it wherever you get your podcast. Right, Rochelle?
That's it.
Thank you very much, Rochelle Lucero. Our guest has been Jimmy Akin. His latest book is Teaching with Authority. You can get it wherever Catholic books are sold.
And since we were talking about Adolf Hitler earlier this hour, this Friday's Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World is going to be What Was Adolf Hitler's Religion?
Just Google Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. You'll be happy you did. Jesus Christ is the light of the nations. And we'll see you next time on Catholic Answers Today.